All right, Emerge 2019, we're going to keep things rolling here. Our next panel is going to have us diving into launching and scaling Premier Initiative Ventures. Let's welcome to the stage Gustavo Trindade, Director of Babson College, Miami, and Polina Raygorodskaya, Co-founder and Chief Executive of Wanderu. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Yep. Well, good morning or good afternoon now. Thank you for being here. So who knows Babson College? I have my own crowd.
Half
You guys
the
know
audience.
Babson? What about Wanderu?
Who's heard of Wanderu? Same people.
Okay. So Babson is a college from Boston. We're turning 100 years this year. We've been in Miami for 2 years now. We have a campus in Brickell. We're on 1200 Brickell Avenue with MBA programs, executive education, and the Wing Lab program as well, a business accelerator for women for free. Today, people in Miami, they say we have a lot of startups already, but some of them don't succeed to grow and scale. So we brought Polina. Polina is an undergrad alumna. I would get lost here and waste all of our time talking about her awards. She has been, in undergrad, she was on the 25 under 25 list. She's been on 30 under 30, 40 under 40, and her business just crossed 100 million, or a couple of months ago, $100 million in revenue. So Wanderu is the best platform for you to book buses and train. So we're going to be covering how she did to launch the business. So we'll be taking her back to the moment when she stumbled into the idea and decided to launch the platform. And then we'll be walking through the product strategy and getting to scale, how she did to acquire customers, and finally fundraising, right? So I would start, Polina, thank you for being here. So she came all the way from Boston. So again, taking you back to when you founded the company, you co-founded the company. So can you educate us on how you get to the idea and how you made to formalize and evaluate the opportunity to make it a real business?
Sure. So I started Wanderu back in 2013 was when we launched the public, but prior to launching, the idea came to us back in 2011. I was part of a group of friends where we wanted to do a cross-country trip to raise awareness for national parks and forests, and we wanted to get from New York to California using only ride shares because we wanted to do something crazy to get people to pay attention. And at that time, I was running a PR firm, and so my background was in public relations and media. And so I used my PR background to get us local media in all of the places that we were going through. And so people started writing to us, offering us rides to get from place to place. And we got from New York to DC to Shenandoah National Park and then to the Jefferson Forest in Virginia. And then we got a call from our next ride share saying, I'm really sorry something came up and I can't give you guys a ride to your next destination. And so we ended up being stranded in the middle of a tiny town of about 50 people in the middle of Virginia. And we thought, okay, maybe we can find a bus or a train to get us to our next destination. And so we turned to Google, which any millennial will do, and looked up bus or train from Newcastle to Indianapolis, which is our next destination. And of course, there was no magical, bus or train that shows up in the middle of a forest to take you anywhere you want to go. And this was all pre-Uber and Lyft days too, so it was complete different world. And so we couldn't find anything, and then we thought, okay, well, maybe we can find the closest bus or train from where we are, some local city. And so we found that there was a bus station in Salem, Virginia, but it didn't go all the way to Indianapolis. So somewhere along the way, we'd have to take another bus or train. We pulled out a map, tried to pinpoint everything together. And after spending over an hour trying to figure it out, we couldn't. And so we ended up having to rent a car for that part of our trip, but it got myself and another person on the trip really frustrated with this idea that you can really find anything you want on the internet, but I can't figure out how to get from point A to point B using any sort of transportation. And so that's what really inspired us. At the time, I was running a PR firm that I started when I was at Babson College, and I was doing pretty well for myself, but the passion to solve this problem just kind of overtook me. And so myself and another person on the trip ended up coming back and doing research into the market, and we realized that there's actually more people traveling by bus and train in the United States than there are flying. So despite the fact that it's something that's not readily available on Kayak or on Priceline or Expedia, there's actually more people traveling by this mode of transportation. And yet there's also more transportation options. So if you look at major cities, there's actually more options to travel by bus between those cities than there is to fly between those cities. So it made no sense that the type of transportation that people actually travel more on, and there's a lot more competition for, there was no central way to be able to book bus and train travel. And that's what inspired me to want to go and start the company. And then another person on the trip became my co-founder. And we put everything aside, and our passion led us to go and create Wanderu, which is now the largest bus and train travel search in North America.
Woo. And, okay, so now we're going to, with that, ask you about like product strategy and team building. So at Babson, we say you cannot be everything to everyone, right? You need to decide what you don't want to be as well. So basically, how did you decide on what would be the differentiators for Wanderu?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. When we first started out, it was very tempting to want to solve all of the problems at the same time, right? So initially our problem came because we couldn't find a rideshare. So we're like, oh, well, let's create a rideshare aggregator and then put buses and trains and other things and hotels and all of this there together into one platform, and then show how much CO2 you're saving from getting emitted into the environment. And so at some point when we first came up with the idea, we just wanted to do everything. And I remember talking to one of our earlier advisors and telling them, oh, we have this great idea, and we want to do this, and this. And they looked at me and they said, I have absolutely no idea what your business is. Like, what is it that you are building? And it became very clear that I needed to narrow down the focus. And so when we launched with just bus travel, just in the northeast of the United States, because that's the biggest travel corridor in North America. And only when we had at least 50% coverage in that region did we launch there. And then we would launch region by region across the country. So in August of 2013, we launched Wanderu just in the northeast of the United States, just for buses. And then the following year, we expanded region by region. So to the Midwest, then to the West Coast, to the Southeast, and only when we had at least 50% coverage, because it was clear that most people that travel by bus are not necessarily taking a bus from New York to Miami, because that's a very long trip. There are some people doing that, but it is not the bulk of the bus travelers. So we wanted to see, how can we solve the problem for the most amount of people in the smallest region to prove that this is something that people would want to use. And so we started just Northeast. By the end of the year, we covered all of North America. The following, not North America, by the end of the year, we covered all of the United States. The following year, we expanded into Mexico, then into Canada, and then about a year and a half ago, we launched in Europe. So we now cover all of North America and Europe. So those are our main markets. We also expanded from just bus travel in the very beginning to include trains, and then we integrated ferries as well, and we're about to launch flights too. So Wanderu is fully multimodal. You can type in any address, city, point of interest. We find the closest station from where you're traveling from and when you're going to. And in real time, we're able to combine the different modes of transport to get you anywhere you want to go within North America and Europe.
Awesome. And on that, I would like to ask a question on customer acquisition, right? So you started segregating by region, by geography. So how did you do to acquire the customers? So our Babson will have a new President-elect Steve Spinelli in July, and he has a book called Never Bet the Farm. So he says, acquire customers and then you worry about the processes. Go get money in and then you worry about building everything in the back. So how do you see that, and how was it for you to grow the business? Because then we're going from launching to scaling the company now. So how was it for you to really get traffic to the platform and to acquire? Because I don't know if it involves getting the board members involved and Greyhound and Track and everybody else. So how was it for you to acquire?
So because Wanderu is a marketplace, it was always really tough, because to convince bus partners or train partners to work with us, we would have to prove that we can give them customers, right? But to give them customers, we need to prove that we have enough bus and train partners for Wanderu to be a valuable platform to customers, right? And so that is why also the strategy to launch region by region was so powerful, because it wouldn't be valuable to a company in Miami if we have customers in San Francisco that will never come and travel to Miami on a regular basis, right? So by being very regional, you were able to really target both the supply side and the demand side at the same time. And we focused on building out SEO first. SEO is the most, the cheapest way to get customers because you don't have to pay for them right away. And so we focused on figuring out what do we need to do to provide the right answers to the questions that customers are asking when they're searching on Google so that it surfaces up top. And so we built out our own custom CMS platform to build out content that was relevant to users, and we're able to scale it out to all of the routes that we had. And we would go and pitch, even before we built the platform, we created screenshots that you could kind of click through to go and see the next part of the website. And then we would go and pitch partners and say, hey, we already have this built. Don't you want to be a part of it? And because we had Green XC, which was the cross-country campaign to raise awareness for national parks and forests, we already had a following through our blog that we were able to start to build up. And through that, we started building out a beta list of users that would come and use Wanderu in advance of us launching to the public. And so by the time we launched, we have over 20,000 people signed up to be part of our beta, all targeted to the northeast of the United States where we were launching. And so we were able to use those numbers to go and convince our partners that this is a platform that they should be on. So by having people sign up before we even launched the product, people didn't know that we didn't have all of the partners when they signed up, but by the time that they signed up, we were able to get the partners on board so that when we launched, we already had enough partners that the product was relevant to the users. So I think it's really important to, in a marketplace, you have to figure out, the chicken or the egg. What comes first, the users or the products? And by creating this private beta, we were able to kind of simultaneously work on building both sides of it so that when we launched, we were able to have them both at the same time.
Awesome. And during this journey, right? So sometimes entrepreneurs, they say, oh, selling $500,000 in the first 5 months, it's relatively easy when you gain some traction, but then going to $1 million, 10 million, 100 million, then it's a different game, right? So how do you see that? How was it for you at Wanderu? And does it involve like building the team? And how did this journey work for you?
So team is absolutely important. I would not be where I am today, and Wanderu would not be where it is today if it wasn't for the amazing team that works for me. I did not build the technology behind Wanderu. We have an incredible set of engineers that have built that out, and we have incredible people doing marketing and PR and business operations and partnerships. So absolutely having the right team is critical to your success. Building that team in the beginning is extremely challenging because you have to, it's very similar to trying to get your first investor, right? Because anybody that joins a startup before that startup has raised any money or is making any money is somebody that really truly believes in that product. And I look at them as investors, right? Even though they're not putting their time, they're putting their money, right? And they could go work anywhere else for a lot more money, but coming to work for us and getting more equity up front is the pitch that we are making. So instead of trying to convince an investor that they should give us $1 million, I have to convince each employee before the company has made it anywhere that this is going to be the company that is going to be the next $1 billion idea and is going to, solve all of the problems in technology. And that's the process. The way that I see it is convincing those early people to join Wanderu was just as critical as convincing the early investors why they should invest in me and why the team is so important. Because without the team, the investors would have never signed on board. And so I think it's really important to look at it this way when you are a startup and trying to figure out, trying to convince co-founders to join, trying to convince your first early employees to join. Many of our employees started out as interns at Wanderu and to this day are now one of our most senior engineers. And they've built so much of our product, and they're incredibly critical to our business. But the way I look at it is they have ownership in the company. They are investors in the business with their time, and that's the most important thing, because without that, we would not be where we are today.
And for the revenue barriers, do you see any of them specifically as the most challenging, or crossing 20 million was as difficult as crossing 50 and 100?
I think every stage of the business has its own challenges. Scaling out and proving product market fit is the first challenge that you have to go through as a startup, because you might think the idea is incredible, but if you don't have users that think the idea is incredible, it really doesn't matter. You can build the most beautiful product, you can have the smartest engineers, but if there aren't enough users that want to use your product, it really doesn't matter, because you don't have a business. And so I think that the first stage is proving product market fit. And then the second stage, once you have proven product market fit, it's creating an amazing product that keeps your customers coming back and keeps them telling other people about it, right? So at any given point in time, there are people talking about Wanderu on social media and recommending it to their friends. We don't pay them to do that. We don't give them anything. The reason they do that is because they have a good experience with the product and they recommend it to their friends. And to me, that is the biggest validation, right? You can pay for customers to use your product once. And you can raise a lot of money and spend a lot of money on marketing and AdWords and billboards and out of home and all of this stuff. But if your customers don't like your product and they don't come back to use it again, or they, more importantly, don't recommend it to their friends, then it really doesn't matter. You will eventually fail no matter how much money you raise or how much you spend on marketing.
Talking about fundraising. So Emerge just released the Emerging Site report on venture capital. So they say there's $130 billion in venture capital investment in the US. Pretty much everything is in Silicon Valley, in Boston, New York. And then there is $1.3 billion in Florida. So 1% of the market is here, or the investments are happening here. So how was it for you guys? You have over $10 million raised. And again, the board members, there were important to be shareholders as well. How was this journey for you on the fundraising side? So you had to have the customers first and the platform and everything so they would come on board, or the team, as you were saying. What can you tell us about the fundraising process?
So I think the statistics I can relate to very well, because I believe the number is only 3% of all venture funding actually goes to female-led startups. So I completely understand the staggering things that are put up against you when you're trying to raise money as a woman, because I had to do it, and I've done it now 3 times. So I definitely, it's very challenging, and I think that having to have access to, the challenge is that investors invest in people that are like them. And what that typically means when the venture capital industry is more than 90% male is that they invest in predominantly males. Because if you look at kind of the history, it's like, oh, well, Mark Zuckerberg was a dropout from college and he did really well, so let's go find a bunch of Mark Zuckerbergs. But if you look at it that way, then you will never find the entrepreneurs that don't look like Mark Zuckerberg. And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that I had to come across, is just learning that, competitors that have male founders, right, are able to have the doors open and have those conversations easier than I do. But all that does is motivate me to work that much harder. And to be completely honest, I don't want an investor that only invests in males, right? So I was able to find some incredible supportive investors that invest in the company because it's a good business and because we're growing really fast. The first round that we raised, we were growing over 400% quarter over quarter. That's very, very fast for a startup. And anybody that doesn't think that that is an incredible growth rate is clearly just not looking at it from an investment standpoint and looking at it from who's founded it standpoint. And that's not the kind of investors that I want to have. And so I think raising funding has taught me a lot of things, right? Our Series A round, it took longer than I wanted it to take, and we got to a point where we were close to running out of funding, and my co-founder and I were seriously thinking about, despite the fact that we were literally growing 400% quarter over quarter, we almost ran out of funding. Like, let that sink in. I don't know any other startup that has gone quite through that experience. And I think that really taught me that, you know what, I don't want to raise funding every 12 to 18 months like many startups do. Instead, I want to build a business that is sustainable, that can generate money and can be profitable. And so with our last round, our goal was, with the Series A, we want to build a business that is profitable. And we hit profitability in August 2017. We stayed profitable for another year, and then we raised a little bit more money to kind of focus on scaling and marketing. But with that, we were able to continue to grow and continue to grow very well. But we grew, we didn't sacrifice, spend all the money and then we can worry about raising more so we can prove that we can grow as fast as we can. We focused on grow, but grow sustainably and prove that you can build a business where the unit economic works and you make money back. And so that's what fundraising taught me is, it's extremely challenging to raise funding. You need to prove you have an amazing team, but sometimes even if you have an amazing team and even if you have incredible growth, that's still not going to guarantee that you will get money in the door super easily. And every time you raise money, it's a huge distraction from operating your business, right? It's like at least 6 months of your time that you can't be spending on building out an amazing team and growing the business in a way that you really should be spending your time on growing it. And so I think the biggest thing that I learned is to not worry too much about, what a hypothetical valuation looks like and, raising money every 12 to 18 months, and instead look at the value that your business makes based on the money that it makes and the growth that it has, and building it out in a sustainable way.
Awesome. Before asking you what's next, so she mentioned 3% of the funding, of VC funding goes to women, right? So Babson was the first college to launch a center dedicated to women's research. So we have a center called CWell, and they're all here looking at me. And it's Center for Women Entrepreneurial Leadership. So they will have panels, is it this afternoon or tomorrow? Tomorrow afternoon, we'll have 3 panels with the CWell. So Babson created this center, and we launched a research project. And we discovered that only 3% of the funding goes to women. So that's something for us to have in mind, and that's why we have the Wing Lab program here in Miami as well. So what's next? So you said you raised more money to continue to grow the business. So where do you see the company going? Is that crossing $1 billion in revenue? What's motivating you?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, again, for us, the motivation is different than I think some of the other startups out there where it's like, I want to create a unicorn, or I want to, have $1 billion business, or I want to raise X amount of money, or whatever it is. For me, the value is, it's always been about solving a problem, right? When I started Wanderu, I had a business that made me plenty of money, and I didn't look at it from, oh, this is going to be the next $1 billion business. It was, wow, this is a massive problem, and I face this problem on a regular basis, and nobody has solved it, so I want to be the one to solve it. And the market is huge. The market is huge worldwide. So we started just in the northeast of the US. We now cover North America. We expanded to Europe. There's still tons of opportunity for growth, both in the market that we started in, but also in the European market where we recently expanded to, and then markets beyond that. So the way that we look at it is, how can we continue to solve the problem of figuring out how to get from point A to point B? I mentioned we're launching flights very soon. So being able to combine, a plane, you fly into somewhere and then you take a bus to your final destination. Or if you're here in Miami, maybe taking a bus or a train, taking the Bright Line up to Fort Lauderdale and flying out of Fort Lauderdale Airport will end up being cheaper than flying out of Miami Airport, and maybe faster, right? So being able to look at all of the options and finding transportation options between airports opens up a whole new market to people that may not be thinking about traveling by bus or train, but here it's all of a sudden, it makes a lot more sense, because if I have to fly internationally and I can save a bunch of time by taking a train for 40 minutes to Fort Lauderdale and flying out of there, why wouldn't I? Why would I fly out of Miami if I have to have an extra layover? And vice versa, if I'm in Fort Lauderdale, maybe taking if I'm flying anywhere in Latin America, there's so many great flights out of Miami that don't necessarily fly out of Fort Lauderdale. And so having all of the options in one place is something that we believe is critical to really solving transportation today. And there's no other travel search that is currently doing this in this kind of way. And so the opportunity is massive, no matter where you look at it. And we are sure that we will have over $1 billion in sales. Like, we are getting closer and closer to that every single day. But at the end of the day, that's not what drives us. That's not the goal. The goal is about creating an amazing product and solving problems in transportation and travel that are not currently being solved today. And that's what we set out to do from the very beginning.
Since you mentioned it, any plans for Latin America? We're the capital of Latin America, so any plans? Absolutely.
I mean, we're already in Mexico, and we're looking at other markets all of the time. So, there's no reason why we wouldn't be in other places in Latin America in the near future.
Okay. And having you here, before I open to questions, you're a product of Babson, and we're proud of you. We're showcasing you here, and we hope her lessons serve to educate you and help you in your journeys. So, what do you? How do you describe Babson? What are the lessons that you take from it, and what do you think Babson did to you?
The energy at Babson is completely contagious. It's incredibly entrepreneurial, and you have so many smart people that are all looking to do different things and have a million ideas. It's like permanently being surrounded by incredibly smart entrepreneurs. And that goes everything from the professors that are there, many of which have their own businesses, have started massive companies. My brand management professor was the CEO of Saucony, which is a massive sneaker brand, and taught me brand management. And so it was, and he brought in CEO from Dunkin' Brands, the CEO, so many incredible people that came into that class. So aside from learning from an incredible CEO, also having other really smart people coming and guest lecturing at the class, it was just such a contagious environment. I did not go to Babson thinking that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was. There are many people that go to Babson because it's the #1 school for entrepreneurship, and they know that this is what they want to do. I did not, and I became an entrepreneur because I went there and I got infected with this disease that everybody has, that just wants to solve the world's problems and change the world and do great things. And it's something that is just part of that environment. And one funny anecdote that I have from Babson is when I first got there, I remember seeing a flyer on the wall, and it said, free dinner, come to this, entrepreneurship, the Dean of Entrepreneurship is running a free dinner, anybody's welcome. There's only like 15 people that can sign up. So I quickly went, I'm a poor college student, I don't have any money. I'm like, oh, free dinner, great, I definitely want to go to that. Put my name on the wall, still had no intention of starting my own company at the time. And mind you, I started my... Is that normal? Do we need to leave? So I started, okay, I'm going to keep going until they tell me to leave. Anyways, so I started my own company when I was... I can't even hear what they're saying. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly finish it until they kick us out because I don't smell a fire. Anyways, so I went to this dinner, and there's a bunch of people there. There's 15 people total, and it's actually a really small room, and we're just sitting around this table, and there's free dinner, so I'm like munching away on the food, and the Dean of Entrepreneurship is asking every single person why they're there, right? Like, why did you choose to come to this dinner? Do you have a company? Do you want to have a company someday? And everybody's going around the circle, and most people either had a company, had an idea, wanted to start a company, right? And then there's me, right? So everybody's going and they're telling these incredible stories about the companies they have or a company they want to start. And it gets to me and I'm like munching away at my food and I just feel so out of place. And I'm like, yeah, I want to start a company someday, definitely. But I didn't actually. So it was that was a tipping point where I was like, I'm in this incredible place. They provide free dinner to entrepreneurs. Like, this is definitely something that I want to do. And just being inspired by all of the people that were sitting around that table that were my age, 18, 19 years old and all starting or have started their own companies really inspired me to want to do something on my own. So that's when, when I got an opportunity to start my own PR firm and start producing fashion shows, I went ahead and took that opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are told that this is a real fire drill and that we do need to exit